Hello, everybody, and welcome to our presentation, Getting a Head Start on College and Career Planning. My name is Dr. Jennifer Winward, and I'm really excited to take you through today's presentation. So we're going to go ahead and get started just with an overview of our agenda for today. So let me just make sure that you can all hear me and that these slides are going to progress for me. Okay. All right, so we all know that applying to college is a daunting process, right? Where do you start? How do you start? How do you pick the right college, right? There are so many questions that people are asking. And so our virtual discussion today is really aimed at focusing on how can teens connect the dots between their strengths, their interests, their personality traits, and then a college or career in which they will thrive. So with our guest presenter today, we're going to learn more about specific assessments that teens can do to identify potential future careers and also to find colleges to help prepare them for those pursuits. And then we're also going to provide some tips to manage the college process and actually to get started this summer. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll go ahead and get started. This is our agenda for today. As I said, I'm Dr. Jennifer Winward, founder and CEO of Winward Academy. I'm excited to be here to welcome you. I'm going to jump in with 5 tips for summer to get ahead on college and career. And then we'll go ahead and bring in our guest presenter today, Satish, who is the CEO and president of MaiaLearning. So he's going to actually focus on 4 specific areas to focus for college and career planning. And then we'll go ahead and end the webinar today with a Q&A with both Satish and me. So let me go ahead and continue to the goals of the presentation. So the first goal today, I'm going to address kind of helping students figure out how to maximize their time this summer, again, to get ahead. What are some specific tips to help you reflect, to help you kind of figure out some things that you can do? And then number 2, which is going to be Satish's task for today, is to really help you all figure out how to target your interests, your values, your personality traits, and your skills, again, to identify those career and college opportunities. One thing that I want to mention before we start is just how important it is for you to be engaged in this conversation. So I really want to make sure that you are feeling free to engage with the Q&A. So you can type a question anytime you have a question. And then also we will, address those as they come up, or we will be sure to address those at the end. So next I'm going to go over my top 5 tips for summer. Oh, there's our screen, sorry about the Q&A. So again, please feel free to engage anytime. So again, we're going to start today just with some 5 big picture tips for summer. So the first thing I really want to encourage teens to do is to reflect about what matters to you, and then to figure out a way that you can do something to act on whatever that passion is. So maybe you're interested in researching cures to diseases, preserving the environment, helping learners with special needs, protecting animals, promoting equity, whatever it is that's really important to you, right? That really lights a fire inside of you about what's most important. I think it's really valuable for teens to reflect about that, identify those areas that are really important to them, and then find ways to act on those passions, right? So again, start with the reflection and then find ways that you can really act on those. And again, it can be a small act in your local community. It can be something for your family. But again, just really kind of starting with that reflection. Number 2 would be to research your dream job. So trying to think to yourself, okay, if you could wave a magical wand and end up with your dream career, what would that career be? And then what you can do is find someone who has that job, reach out to that person, and then respectfully request an informational interview. So basically reaching out to this professional, identifying yourself, giving a little bit about yourself, where you go to high school, why you're interested in kind of this dream career pursuit, and then respectfully requesting, 15 minutes of that person's time to be able to ask insightful and well-researched questions about that person's journey, about the skills and the interests and the personality traits that were important to be able to achieve that role, right? And again, just make sure that you show up with those super thoughtful questions to ask. Number 3 would be to actually go to college websites. So think of the colleges that you're interested in, go to their websites, right? Because every organization right now, just as we're doing today, is planning a lot of virtual discussions to be able to connect with the community. So figure out what is your dream college, or what are your top 5 colleges or your top 10 colleges. Go to their websites and find webinars that they are actually hosting, because then you will have the opportunity to listen and to learn from their professors, right? Or from people who work on their campus and are in their community. So it would be a great way to connect with research that they're doing, to connect with professors who are really making a big impact on the community, and just to learn from them. And I think this is also a great idea because a lot of colleges have an essay, how did you learn about us? Or why are you interested in applying here? And if you can give specific answers to those questions about attending webinars hosted by a certain organization on campus or by a certain professor, and what you learned and how it was engaging to you and really made you feel connected to the community, I think that that's a really important thing that you could share. Number 4 is to identify a topic that you're passionate about, and then find 5 books about that topic that you can read. So the reason I think this is important is, again, reading is just such a great skill for your lives. And because we're trying to make things as fun as possible in summer, when we're still trying to keep your brains very active and engaged, I think if you can pick a topic that you just love, so maybe something from history or a famous musician or a specific movement that was really enticing for you to learn about, find 5 books about that topic and then just dig in, right? Just start reading, because again, it's going to be great for your mind, but it's also going to be really stimulating for you to learn more about a topic that you're passionate about. For number 5, I would encourage students to challenge themselves in a new or unfamiliar way, right? So maybe it's creating art, or writing a song, or composing poetry, or choreographing a dance, or something like that that's maybe a means of expression that's new, that's unfamiliar, and then really challenge yourself in that space. And one reason I think that's important is, of course, it's just great to kind of get out of your comfort zone and be creative and be intellectually curious. But I also think it's just something fun and playful that would be great to do that could also evolve into a college essay, because sometimes what makes college essays so great is when people are honest about when they were silly, or when they did, not do something well, but they just went for it anyway to try. So I think that looking for opportunities to do those types of things would just be a really great idea. Next thing that I wanted to talk about are kind of a big picture goal of 5 things that you can do. So kind of this bonus activity for summer, because I think that right now people are struggling with their mental health. They're struggling with so much uncertainty in our world. They're struggling to find ways to connect to their communities. And one thing that I've noticed a lot with teens is that they can define goals for themselves, but sometimes they're not really actionable goals. So what I think is important to encourage is kind of look at these 5 categories, right? For my community this summer, I will blank. For my mental health, I will blank, right? But we need to make sure that those blanks are very actionable. So if you say to your son or daughter, if you're joining us as a teen and you're starting to think, okay, for my community, what am I going to do? You don't want to say something like, for my community, I want to help, right? That's not really an actionable example. You want to be very specific with what you define. So for my community, I want to identify a nonprofit that promotes a mission I care about, and I'm going to email 2 people who work there and introduce myself and ask how I can contribute this summer, right? So you really define the goal super specifically. Or something like, for my mental health, I want to not go on social media as much. Again, that's a goal, but it's not an actionable goal. So you really want to turn things into definitions for yourself that are very easy to follow. So for my mental health this summer, I will not go on an electronic device for the first 30 minutes when I wake up, and for the 30 minutes before I go to sleep. Right, so again, so you've defined it in a way that is very specific and easy to follow, so then it's very clear to you whether you are achieving that goal or not. So again, I think it would be a really fun activity. This is even great for adults to do as well. It's just in these 5 areas, think of actionable things that you can do to meet these different needs for your community, for yourself, right? Your mental health, your physical health, your mind, your learning. This is all so important. And then for global awareness, right, that could even be something really fun. So for my global awareness, I will learn about other countries, right? Again, that's not an actionable goal. What you could do instead is say, for my global awareness, I want to learn the kind of famous recipes or kind of those token recipes from each country. And then each week I want to cook one of those dishes that I choose at random, right? So just something that you can, again, turn into a fun activity, but at the same time, you're taking care of yourself, you're becoming more globally aware, and you're also connecting to your community. So those are just kind of some ideas to get us started. Again, kind of big picture tips for summer, this little bonus activity if that's something that you think that you would like to embrace. So next, what I'm going to do is introduce our guest speaker to you. I introduced Satish to you earlier as the president and CEO of MaiaLearning. So before we bring Satish on, I just want to give a little bit of background about him. So he has over 20 years of experience in the internet industry. So actually supporting the growth of companies like eBay and PayPal and Apple. When he was actually helping his daughter through the college application process, that is when he had this idea of wanting to develop a platform that really helps to ease the anxiety and address the nuances that occurred during the college application process. So that's kind of the story behind his development of MaiaLearning. It's currently used in over 65 countries. They have over 1 million users. We do have some people, of course, joining us today from San Diego. So for those of you who go to La Jolla Country Day or to Parker, you're probably very familiar with MaiaLearning because that's, of course, a resource that those schools provide to you. So what I'm really excited about for Satish joining us today is, again, I really want all of the parents, all of the teens joining us to develop this deeper insight about these specific tools and assessments that exist for students to administer to themselves and then use that information to advance their futures. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Satish to join. He's going to take us through his presentation. And then again, please feel free to reach out anytime in the Q&A if he brings up anything that you want to ask more questions about. And then we'll regroup after his presentation for Q&A with all of you. So just give us a second to bring Satish on, and then I will hand things over to him for him to share his screen.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for that wonderful introduction.
Absolutely.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley, so it is afternoon here. And I'm going to talk about the application process, all of the steps students will go through from 9th through 12th grade in preparing themselves for the application process. We do support, as Jennifer said, over 65 countries. We have many schools in the US as well. But this is not about the product. This is about the process. So let me play my screen here. So that's our MaiaLearning. I want to start with what a student journey would look like. Now, there are additional steps to this process, which typically happens in the final year, the senior year of students, where they go through the actual application process. That's where the counselors will get involved. The students will potentially apply to through the common application or the UC application, and then all the documentation that gets sent will go through our platform if the school has that. But for now, we will focus on getting to that stage of being ready to start the application process. So we look at the student journey in 3 different steps. The first step is all about the student understanding about themselves. It is also a very important step for parents to understand about their children. And we do that through a set of assessments. I will show you some of these assessments. And they are publicly available. Some of these are publicly available. You can go to different sites, and I have those resources in my presentation that we will share with you later. The second step is to really research and plan. We always start with the longer goal in mind. Where do I want to be in terms of my career? And that's where we start with the career process. And then we connect the dots. If I were to go into a specific career, what kind of programs I should study, where can I find colleges that provide those programs? And of course, there's always the money question. Obviously, students will get funding from universities through merit scholarships, awards. Some people take loans, and there are external scholarships as well. And so we'll talk a little bit about the scholarship side of things. And then the third piece is all about showcasing the student. At the end of the day, when you look at an admissions process, a university is building a community in that cohort. And they're looking for a very diversified set of students. And they look at what does the student bring to the table. And so showcasing the student is a very important aspect. There's obviously things such as your grades, your essays, there's test scores, and many of the universities are moving to test optional. But then there's the essay. The essay tells you about who am I, but there's always, you can showcase yourself. And that collective data set is what the universities will go over in making a decision as to whether a student is admitted or not. So that's the 3 steps that I will go through today. So let's start with learning about yourself. We do these through a set of assessments. We have 4 assessments. We generally talk about 4 different assessments, and it's looking at students in different dimensions. We look at interests. Interests drive passion, and passion drives success. Similarly, we look at values. What's most important to me when I go to a job? Because if the job doesn't satisfy your values, you're not going to be happy. And if you're not happy at a job, you will probably not be very successful. We look at personality. This is a very important dimension in determining, the careers that you get into. The personality dimension typically tells us how much you would enjoy that specific job. And so that's one of the dimensions we look at. And then we look at the 4th dimension, which is the skills. This assessment looks at what skills do I have today that are demonstrated. And then some of these things are things that evolve over time. So for example, if I look at my personality, everybody has, blind spots, and there are strengths, and it's not a negative, but those are things that evolve over time. Similarly, skills will evolve over time. So we use these dimensions to help guide the students through the first process of planning for careers. We do these through a set of assessments. The first one is the interest profiler. It's a short assessment, takes about 20 minutes. It looks at various things of what the student likes, and then comes up with a determination of what we call as the interest profile, which I will show you in a second. We also look at the values. The values is the one that I just spoke about, which tells us what is the most important things for me when I get into a career. And this is a card sorting algorithm. It pops up a card, and these are publicly available, as I said. And once the student completes these assessments, each of these 2 assessments takes about 20 minutes each. And when they complete that, you get their result set. So here we're looking at the interests of the student having completed that specific assessment. We call this as the RIASIC code. We're looking at the realistic, investigative, or artistic characteristics or interests of the student. And generally, we generate a list of careers. And if you take this at ONET, which is the source of this, it will generate a set of careers that might be interesting for the student. And as I said, interest drives passion, and all of the careers that come about based on your assessment result will show interests that are best fit based on that interest. Similarly, the work values looks at what is important to me. So in this specific example, achievement is an important aspect. Support and independence are important aspects. We generally take the top 3. You could take the 4th one as well. So for example, some people may like to be recognized at the work. And those are the values that makes them happy and successful in those careers. At the end of the day, we're looking at, are they successful in their career, because success leads to growth, promotions, and obviously the end result is better remuneration. So those are the 2 assessments we look at in terms of interest that drive passion, and work values, things that are important to me as a person in that job. The 3rd assessment we look at, and this is one of the most important. Sometimes I get questions asked, right, which is the most important one that you think we should take? We generally lean towards the personality one. This is a very thought-provoking assessment. There are questions or scenarios painted, and the student has to pick one or the other. This is a longer assessment. It takes about 30 minutes. We do hope that students just don't click the answers, but they actually read the questions or the scenarios and think through how they feel about that and who are they in that if they were put in that scenario. When they complete that assessment, we get to see there are 16 sets of traits or character traits that come out of this. And so in this case, we see that the individual is an introvert. You can see his sensory areas. He's a feeler and he's a judger. And so that's the personality assessment. This is a very famous assessment, Meyer Speaks. It is taken in industry. When I worked at eBay, as Jennifer was mentioning, companies use the Meyer Speaks to find out what are the strengths of the individual so that they can actually channelize their strengths and use them to the best ability for the company and make them successful. So you see the character traits, but what you as parents and students also see is a very good read of who this person is. And you can, I won't read the whole thing, but the things that we focus on are the strengths and blind spots. We look at their strengths in terms of, how do we channelize their strengths and help them work around blind spots. It is not negative to have a blind spot. And we can help them work around those blind spots so that they don't put themselves in an awkward situation. Similarly, there are questions in this assessment that talks about the measures, their college and career satisfiers, negotiating styles, and strengths and blind spots in those specific areas. A very important aspect is that this assessment, all of these assessments generate careers, and each of those careers based on the assessment indicates whether they'll be successful because of their passion, based on their work values. In this case, we look at careers that are satisfying for the person. This specific assessment has been taken over 6 million times, and there is a lot of statistical data behind the results that comes out of that. And I'll show you a couple of those results in a second. The fourth assessment we take is the skills, and all of these are based off of standards. This is based off the Hexaco standard. It's about 50 years of research. This again takes about 20 to 25 minutes. They go through about 45 to 50 questions. And the outcome of that is we look at the different areas. There's 6 areas of skills. We look at leadership skills, social emotional skills, commitment, critical thinking, systems, and creativity. The assessment measures them at a high level for each of those areas, the skills areas. And every skill area is broken down into multiple facets. So here, for example, in the social emotional skills area, you can see the different facets: acceptance, resilience, and some of these facets can overlap in different areas. For example, in leadership, networking is a very important aspect. Charismatic is another piece of it. So you will see common facets across leadership, across the skills area. And what we show here is how they rank at the facet level. And then you can actually view what we term as a lesson plan that shows them how they can improve themselves in that specific facet itself. So we look at what skills do I demonstrate today and where can I improve myself. Now, the personality is a character trait. You cannot change it. You can influence it. The skills is something that evolves and you can improve and learn and develop over time. And these measurements are happening at this instant in time when that student takes the assessment. Generally in our product and in schools, what we have students do is take these once a year, and you can actually see the progression of how the students are developing and improving, or things are changing in their different assessments. So that's how we start looking at and understanding about me or myself. And then that leads into, as I said, each of these assessments generates a whole list of careers. And so we look at careers, and a great source of careers is in the Department of Labor. There's a site called ONET. If you go to ONET, there's career search. You can search all kinds of careers. You can search based on industry. You can search based on keyword search. And when you search these careers, you can actually research. And that's one of the things we like for students to do, is understand that research process and understanding the careers themselves. It's not about, looking at a career and saying, oh, I would like to be a brokerage clerk. It's about, what does that career mean? How do I get there? And it's like project managing yourself as you go through the high school years. So in this, what I'm showing you here are careers based on industry search, and I picked finance and insurance. In the second one, this is based off of the recommendations coming off of the assessments. This specific one that you're seeing here is based on the Myers-Briggs personality assessment. And the results will show in terms of career pathways. And within each career pathway, we show them different careers. The goal is for students to research this. That's the most important. Ignore the salary column, because salary will not make you happy if you don't enjoy that career. So we go through each of these, we generate these lists, and we ask the students to start researching the process. They can look at a specific career. In this case, we're looking at clinical data managers, and we provide a full, or the tool will provide a full career summary. It shows you what your responsibilities are going to be as a data manager or a clinical data manager. What kind of work activities will I do on a day-to-day basis? What kind of education level should I have at a minimum to get into this specific career? What kind of academic knowledge should I bring to the table to get into this career? And then for each of the careers, we show them what programs or majors they should be pursuing when they go post-secondary school. So that's very important as part of the planning process, because if the students know that these are the set of professions I want to get into, and they can identify what is the education requirement, what programs and majors they should pursue, then when they search those colleges, they can find what kind of things that they're looking for in the students, what coursework should they be taking in the high school years. So if you're obviously leaning towards medical sciences or sciences, you want to focus on maybe biology, chemistry, advanced courses in those. If you're leaning towards the engineering side of things, maybe you want to focus on the math and the calculus and the algebras. And so it really helps you think through that process and early on. And the earlier you do this, the better, because you get enough years left in your high school years to take the right level of courses and the right number of courses so that you qualify into those programs. So that's the researching careers part. And what we do, generally what we advise students is it's not just about understanding the careers, which is very important, identifying all of the areas that they should pursue, the programs and majors they should think about, but there are also other characteristics of that career that are important that students should know by the time they get to that career. This is a long process. It's not happening in their 9th grade. It's happening through their high school. They're going to college, and they're going to learn some more of these different areas. And so we look at knowledge, we look at skills, abilities, tools, and technologies. And what we do in the process is, as they have identified careers, we have them look at these different attributes. Some of these they're already learning in high school. For example, they're learning about English language, maybe some history, but not necessarily on archaeology or sociology or anthropology. So students can identify attributes, select these attributes, and say, these are things I'm going to focus on over the next year. And they do this, it's an iterative process. In their 9th grade, they'll pick some of the attributes. In the 10th grade, they'll pick some more. So for each of these attributes areas, so for skills, I might spend some time improving my critical thinking skills, improve my abilities in maybe written expression. Tools and technologies are things that you learn over time, and identifying which ones you want may help you identify internships that you might want to take and experience some of these things. So that's the process we take them through, identifying those. And so we're going through a step-by-step process, looking at careers, identifying attributes, and we don't want them to stop there. it's great to identify these. How do you get there? And that's the planning piece. This is kind of the final piece that will help them. And so they can note down all of these different attributes and then put action items. How am I going to get there? So how am I going to learn about biology, radiation therapists, and dental hygienists? Maybe they will take some time in looking at these professions. Maybe they do an internship. So we help them through the process. As you can see, it's managing a process, identifying and tracking it. And people who plan are the best, of the most successful. And that's the process we go through from a career planning perspective. And in that process, they've also identified majors they might be thinking about that can help them plan their courses in the high school. Maybe in the 10th grade, they will take some more difficult lessons. And when they come to 11th or 12th, they might think about AP courses. So that's the career planning. Once they plan their process, when they complete the process of planning and identifying some of these things, they can start thinking about choosing their schools. Where do I want to go to college? And there are plenty of sites available, public sites. You can go to College Board. College Navigator is the Department of US education site from Department of Education. And this site, these are all free to access. And students can go through the research process again, find universities. There's a whole set of filters that they can look at. They can look for four-year colleges. I want it in a specific state. I'm looking for a specific type of school. So for example, here in this that I have, it shows you I'm looking for a not-for-profit school. It needs to be a four-year college or university. I'm looking for a medium-sized town, and I get results. And so they can continue to filter down. There's about 7,000 colleges, about 4,500 four-year colleges they can search from. They can search based on test scores or show me ones that don't require test scores. There's sports data. If you're into athletics, you can find universities or colleges that have the NCAA program or NJCAA programs. And based on the type of sport, it could be basketball for women. There's lots of search tools out there. So identifying and finding your short list of colleges is the process that we take them through. So once they find a university of interest, they should research the university. So here I have, I've picked, I believe, this is Yale as an example. There's lots of data. You can find out about Yale. There's where they're located. There are a lot of other products out there that have campus tours, especially nowadays with COVID. None of us can travel. How do I look at the university? So there are sites out there that you can go in and look at virtual tours of the entire campus. They walk you through the dorms, the classrooms, the library, all of those. And some of them are student-led tours. It's very interesting to listen to their experiences so they can research about the university. They can look at what does this university look like for me? What does the campus community look like? In this case, it's almost an even split, undergrad versus grad. 99% of the students are full-time and evenly split between male and female. And you can see the demographics broken down by state level and also by ethnicity. Some students might be interested in some campus organizations. So this is the kind of data you can start to look for. You also look at admission requirements. What is this university looking for at a minimum? So there's different application types. There are deadlines you need to follow. There are test requirements, acceptance rates. That's a very important aspect of acceptance rates. This is Yale. It's a highly selective school. Stanford, for example, here in the Bay Area is also a very selective school. They also have an acceptance rate of about 6%. They get about 25,000 applications. I believe they take less than 2,000 students in a cohort. It shows you the academic profile based on students that were admitted last year. And we look at the middle 50th percentile. Essentially, we look at test scores of students that were admitted in this range. Of course, if you're above the range, you have a good chance of getting into the university, but this is not the only factor. It's very important to understand there are several factors in the admissions process. They look at GPAs, they look at test scores. Some schools don't care about test scores. And then they look at the essay. That's a very important aspect of students, the authentic voice of the student coming out in their essays. They look at a well-rounded student. Has a student consistently done things? Have they pursued certain activities? So those are important, but all of these factors start to get together as you go through that research process. Financial aid is an important aspect. So you will find information about how much tuition you have to pay, how much of financial aid the university has, and so what are the chances of us getting that financial aid from the school, merit scholarships, obviously, and there are calculators in all of these university websites. There's something called as an EFC calculator. It actually tells you how much of that total amount of fees should come from the family side. It's the contribution from the family. So there's calculators for that. We look at obviously degrees and majors. It's a very important aspect as you research colleges. If your children are very interested in pursuing higher education, they want to do their bachelor's and master's degree, do they want to stay in that university? All of the different programs they offer, there's a ton of information out there. And College Board is one of the great sites. You can find almost everything, and they have data for all of the colleges. So that's the research process students will go through. And when they like what they're seeing, they're interested in that program, they're interested in the university, they will create a short list of colleges. And there are very important aspects when you create a college. So here is an example of a college. What are the things to look for, and how do you track this? And you could do this through a tool like MaiaLearning, or you could do this on your own. You could keep a spreadsheet, but it's important to compare all of the different colleges. You won't just pick one, you'll probably pick 20 colleges and create this comparative data for the colleges that you're interested in. So things to look for. There's something called rank your choice. You can actually create a column on your spreadsheet saying, this is my first preference, this is my second preference. If I don't get in this one, maybe I'll go to the second one, or maybe I don't get enough financial aid from the first one, and I will go to the second one. So you kind of rank order your choices. You can keep notes about every college. What's important for you? Does it meet you? What questions do you have? Because at some point in time, you're going to have a discussion with the admissions reps. They come to your high school. Nowadays with COVID, there's a lot of virtual fairs, and you can ask those questions. So write down those questions, keep notes, and compare notes across colleges. What kind of application am I going to apply with? There are all kinds of processes, and your students will learn that when they get into their senior year. It looks daunting, but they will get a hang of it fairly quickly. You either apply directly on the college, or you go to the Common App, where you can apply to 800 universities with one application, or you apply with one application to CSU. Important things to look at is the deadline of the application, because when you get into that final year, the most amount of time students will spend is identifying their college list and writing their essays, because the essay is the most important one to show your authentic voice. And so make sure you prepare and have enough time, because in parallel you have all of your other activities. You've got your high school activities, maybe you're in sports, you've got your tougher courses you're taking in the senior year. So it's important to plan ahead. Indicate which programs you're thinking about applying to. It's an important decision, because sometimes you may get admitted to a different program. So keep that in mind. Plan on getting things ahead of time. So we always have what we call as an internal deadline. If the application is due in January, I want to try and get my material together by October 30th, so that I have time to look over it, revise it, update my essay before the application deadline comes. And a lot of these tools also provide information about whether they require a teacher to write a recommendation or a counselor to write a recommendation. So make sure you keep track of that. Some colleges require no recommendations. For example, the UCs don't require a recommendation. So in this case, put together information about yourself. It could be a teacher who taught you a year ago, and you want to go to them and provide them what we call as a brag sheet. It's like a resume of yourself. Find out, what they might be asking for and what you would like to ask them to, how would you like them to portray you as a student. This is one of the most important aspects as they go through the planning process. And it can all be done on a spreadsheet if you'd like, or through another tool or a collection of tools. So that's creating your list. And of course, once you have this list together, the rest of the process will fall together with the high school process. You'll apply through the application process, whether it's Common App or a college directly. And then the counselors will follow through with sending out your transcripts and recommendation letters and all of that. So that's how we go through the whole process. And then the final step, what we think about is showcasing yourself. This is very important because, as I said, the colleges are building a community and they want to know more about you, not just your academics. And so how do you showcase yourself? You can build a portfolio. And a portfolio can have multiple things in it. And you can create this in a Word document. You can find portfolio tools. And essentially, it's like a resume of yourself, but it's a larger section of a resume. We generally like online portfolios because you can share a portfolio with universities. You can send them a link, like you can take a look at me here and you'll get a 360-degree view of me. And so in the portfolio, obviously, there's some personal data. What are your 5 career interests, top universities, your experiences. That's a very important aspect. Students will do a lot of things during their high school years. They may do community service. They might be involved in the robotics club or a debate club. And documenting all of those is very important. And documenting those at that point in time, when it's fresh in their memory, is very critical because you don't make it up. You're experiencing it and you're putting your thoughts and adding those in there. We also recommend that students build what we term as a gallery. A gallery could be a multimedia format. You could have pictures, you could have short clip videos. Do not make videos that are 15, 20 minutes long. Generally, admissions officers have about 45 seconds. And so if you have a very short clip about yourself in an activity or just a video about yourself speaking to them, build those galleries. You can also incorporate as part of your galleries your accomplishments, things like I was in the robotics club and here's the stages, here's my design that I went through. And you can represent that through PowerPoint, through documents, calculations using Excel, all kinds of documents, and tie that together into a gallery. We also love this whole concept of writing journals. It's important for students to capture things as they happen in time. So let's say a student went to Paris and went to the Louvre Museum and they really loved it. And what came out of that and what was their experience, they can just write a short paragraph and manage that in their journals. And it's very important because when they start writing their college essay, these are the things that can come back together to help them improve that essay that they're putting together. So that's the fourth component, the portfolio section, very important. As I said, when admissions are looking at students, they're building a community. They're looking at obviously your academic data, your test scores, your grades. They're looking at your essay. They want to hear you loud and clear who you are and what you bring to the table. And some of these things just add to that. Your galleries will showcase who you are, experiences that you've gone through. And some of those experiences may be very great experiences. You really loved it. Some of them were not that great, but it had an impact on you. And that's the kind of story they would like to hear. So that's the portfolio. And we always look at where do I start? These are all different things that you have to do at different times in the process. Typically what we do, and this is a little bit about our product, but nothing stops you from putting together a set of activities. We drive everything through activities. We call that as the scope and sequence. And for each of these different activities, you have the career activities, and that could just be a listing of, I'm going to take this assessment on this day and I'm going to finish it. And so you're keeping track of everything and managing the whole process together. And with a tool, with a spreadsheet, obviously parents should be very involved in this process, helping their children. And this will really help you put in a very systematic way, getting your students prepared for college. So with that, I will switch back and hand it back to Jennifer, and we'd be happy to take any questions you have.
Great. Thank you so much, Satish. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, so I love that you were able to just take us through the kind of 4 big picture things that students should really be focusing on as they're pulling together this process, right? As you experienced before starting Maya, that is incredibly stressful for families, right? It's a lot to organize, it's a lot to track. One thing that you shared that I really love and just want to echo for those joining us is the importance of the authentic voice in the essay. And there's actually a tip that I give to my students about before you submit this essay, how do you know if it's ready? And it kind of connects back to your ideas about interests and skills and your personality. So I encourage students to basically take what they think is their final version of their essay and give it to a stranger. Right. So now that cafes are reopening, hopefully this is something that could maybe open up as a possibility, but you approach someone, you offer, hey, if I get you a coffee or a tea, would you do me a huge favor and read my essay? Because remember, the people reading your essays in college admissions, they're strangers. So if you ask for something like this and then say to the person, after you read this essay, tell me what you think about me. What do you think my skills are? What do you think my values are? What do you think my personality traits are, right? And just making sure that the goal of the person they're trying to show colleges they are is that coming through in an authentic way. So I think that what you did was really pull together that, you know, students need to do some reflection to address their skills and identify their interests. And then after they can pursue activities and journal and keep track of what they do and what they really enjoy, that those can really naturally evolve into beautiful stories that they can then share with the universities about who they are and what they care about. So I think that was really great to just learn more about that process and how critical it is for young people. So I guess what we'll do now is open up to the Q&A. It looks like we have a couple questions in here. One question is, with COVID changing the campus environment so severely, what is advice about college visits? So I know that you mentioned that there are some of these virtual experiences. Do you want to maybe talk a little more about those?
Yeah, I can talk a little about that. This is clearly a big problem. We know that some of the universities may not even open in the fall, but fortunately, a lot of universities have started to put together virtual fairs. We at MaiaLearning have been approached by universities to offer the ability for them to host virtual fairs through the platform. And so we're going to be releasing one of these. We're going to release in about a month or so the ability for universities to schedule virtual fairs. We manage the whole scheduling process and advertise them, and it's open to the public. There's no cost to attending any of these virtual fairs. In our website, we will have it in a public site. You don't have to log in to get into those. And there are plenty of these that are happening. And there will be a lot of them happening as we move along in the fall as well. So definitely the universities are paying a lot of attention. And they're not only just about, and there are various topics. They're talking about the admissions process. They're talking about programs in the university. And so yes, there's definitely a lot of those. We'd be happy to publish them, and you know, when we get that together. And I can send you other sites that have those as well as resources to look for.
Yeah, Satish, what would be great, because we usually follow up these calls, and for all the people who attended, we send them a little list of the key takeaways for some notes that we took on the call, and then we also give them links for resources. So if we can connect and I can get those from you, I can be sure to share them. And then as those virtual fairs are happening, I think it would be wonderful to just share those with our students, just again, so that they can attend those virtual events.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have another question here about the best way to determine how much merit scholarship a school will provide. Is that something you want to tackle, Satish, or you want me to answer?
Go ahead and answer.
Okay, so unfortunately, there is not a perfect formula to know what type of merit scholarship you will get. And a lot of times, unfortunately, you will apply to a university. They give you options to check a box if you want to be considered for merit scholarships. And then a lot of times you're accepted, and then you find out later, sometimes even weeks later, what the school is going to do in terms of providing financial support in the form of merit scholarships or in the form of financial aid. So the best advice I can give is that a lot of the scholarships and the merit scholarships are very numbers based. So they use a lot of your essays to really determine acceptance. And then they look at the rigor of your courses, kind of ACT, SAT scores, and GPA when then determining more of the financial piece. So I would just encourage students to, do the best they can. Clearly, with a lot of the schools going test optional, right, it's just been a nightmare for families to schedule to take the ACT or SAT because of all the cancellations and rescheduling. So a lot of universities are saying, hey, if by the time you apply, you couldn't get to a site and take it, you can still apply and we'll still consider your application. But that being said, if you do take it, or if you have taken it, or if you do take it and do really well, you absolutely want to provide those scores because it's really going to help you in the scholarship process.
Also on the scholarship process, we will publish a site that has general scholarships outside of what universities provide. There's about 2 million scholarship database. There's also local scholarships that your schools typically have access to. So you would want to get as much as you can across the board. Don't just rely on what university provides you.
Yeah, that's great advice. Private scholarships are huge. And a lot of times even there are these huge scholarships and they don't have a lot of people apply. And so it's definitely good to do research to find out what's out there because there's a lot of private money that can help finance college without having to rely on the university to also provide support. We have another question here about any information on how schools are changing SAT, ACT requirements. So I hopefully was able to hint at that a little bit, right? So we do have a lot of colleges, even Harvard just a couple days ago said, hey, we know it's so hard to schedule this. You can apply without the scores if you're not able to take the test. So again, I just think it's something that if you've taken it or if you are planning to take it and you do really well, you absolutely want to share your scores because that will help you and it will be advantageous for you. But if you live in a city where every ACT or SAT between now and December is canceled, then you wouldn't have the opportunity to take it. And so the colleges are going to be accepting applications from students who don't include scores. Okay, let's see our next question. It says, many students' activities, including sports, may not be happening this fall, sure. And many students who rely on one significant activity don't have meaningful activities as an alternative. What do you advise for students in sharing their stories with colleges? Satish, would you like to answer that or I can answer it?
That's a tough one. It's obviously because, and especially when you're talking about if sports or one of these activities was the most important one, obviously universities are also in the same point, but there is already, you have enough historical data about that student in those activities, and you should leverage all of that. It's not that they missed just this summer, for example, but over the past years, they probably have accumulated a lot of that experiences, and they should definitely use that too as they go through that application process.
Yeah, I would emphasize as well that the colleges understand. I mean, they're going to know as people are applying that it's been a very chaotic time and that things have been canceled. And so I think to Satish's point, they're going to focus a lot on what you did freshman year, sophomore year, and your first half of junior year, when being able to evaluate students fairly for what the activities are that they did. And one thing too that's really important to mention is that colleges are starting to place a lot more emphasis on the activity section and the way that students describe their activities.
Mhm.
So it's really important for you all to know that, you know, when you apply on the Common App, they give you room for 10 activities. And to Satish's presentation about how important it is to really reflect about yourself and to connect to activities that you engage in that, you know, reflect who you are and what you care about, that story of what's captured in the activity section is very important. So if there is this activity that someone was doing for a really long time and then got canceled, again, the colleges are going to understand, and they're still going to be fair when looking at, okay, well, this is something the student did throughout high school. This is how the student, you know, grew in his or her responsibilities or contributions. So what I will say is just make sure that you give extra care to the activity section, that you're really highlighting what you did and why you did it and how you made a unique contribution, by using very strong action verbs and just making sure that you're really emphasizing to the colleges how important this was and how you really grew through that activity. It looks like we have room for about one more question from someone anonymous. It says, with such a drop off of academics the last 3 months, what advice do you have for bridging the skills gap in preparing for the new academic year? So for an academic question, I'll definitely jump on this one. And then Satish, please feel free to jump in if you have another thought. What I am recommending to all of our families that they do this summer, because absolutely they're, you know, learning loss prevention is a huge focus right now. So any opportunity that you have to just keep your mind active this summer, I mentioned earlier how important it is to keep reading. A lot of students are looking for opportunities to get ahead in math class, or maybe even to make up things that they didn't learn at the end of last semester. So I think that that's critically important, especially in math, because it builds so much every year. So putting in time, again, kind of the big three: writing, reading, and math. Anything that you can do this summer to keep your mind really sharp in those areas is going to be important. And to what Satish shared earlier about journaling, I mean, I know it might sound a little cliche to recommend that people write more or maybe even journal or reflect, but it is a great way to build that skill and just kind of practicing, you know, what am I trying to say? What am I trying to reflect? Let me do that. And then let me critique my own voice to make sure that I'm achieving that goal. I mean, that's exactly what they're going to have to do for the college essays. So even doing that in smaller bits and pieces this summer will be really good for students to do. Satish, any last thoughts about kind of the skills
I,
gap?
I think everybody is aware of the gap in the academics. Even at the university level, we're seeing and hearing a lot about trends in enrollment going down. So, you know, it's a competitive landscape, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of rationale in the admissions process as we go forward with COVID and how they look at students. They would expect that there's going to be some shortfall, might be small amount of relaxation in how they look at students. And obviously the universities are going to suffer from an enrollment perspective. So they would like to get universities, even if it's, you know, local, they would absolutely admit some of those students. So I wouldn't put too much emphasis on this. I also hear about schools that are going to start early or get some additional help during the next years to make sure that the skills gap and academic gaps are filled. And we hear that across the board: private schools, public schools, charter schools. But it is a strange time. So it's a strange world we're living in. And I do expect this to change over time.
Yeah. Yeah, and kind of just as a final note, because again, clearly everyone's joining us today, right, because they're worried and concerned and anxious about this process, but colleges are saying over and over again how much they understand, how we're all adapting and working together to make sure that students are, you know, applying to college in as good a mental space as possible. So maybe just a final note to connect back to that original message that I had about how important it is to set actionable goals, connecting those to your interests, to your values, to your skills and your personality traits, and then really trying to clearly define actions that you can take to really take care of yourself, take care of your community. And again, those are important to do for you, and then they can naturally evolve into great college essays as well. All right. Well, thank you all again so much for joining us. Satish, thank you for sharing your afternoon with us and our audience. I really appreciate your time and
Absolutely. Most
expertise.
welcome.
And thank you all again for joining us. Definitely be on the lookout for emails from us that have those notes that we promised you and those links to resources. So we will, our Winward Academy team will pull those notes together and share those soon. So thank you again and have a great afternoon, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Satish. Thank you.